Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'd like to welcome back Rabbi Dr. Josef Sokol. We're honored to have him back. He took time out of his day, and thank you. Yosef, please introduce yourself again for those that don't know.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Yosef Sokol. I have smicha from Yeshiva Space Yosef, and I have a PhD from Hofstra University. I'm currently a research scientist in the VA, as well as a professor in Torah University, and I am happy and honored to be here to discuss my new book, Becoming Godly.
Okay, cool. So Yosef recently published a book about called Becoming Godly, and we want to talk about the ideas in that book. Could you please just give us the motivations of the book and what brought you to writing those? Because it's really fascinating how your professional career and your yeshiva background really formed these ideas, and it's so appropriate for the ideas that you formed. Yeah, that's. I'd like to hear what your motivation was.
My motivation was kind of multiple. I think whenever in every difficult work, there's usually many things that go into trying to kind of leading you to spend the many thousands of hours to do this. But my primary motivation was because I saw a divide. People thought of psychology, science, humanity from as though it's its own separate area from the vision we have from the Torah about what's important in life. And while, of course, these are separate in the sense that they are not the same language, they don't have the same mechanisms, and the whole project of understanding the world from each one is separate, nonetheless, it's the case. I mean, over time, I realized that my work as a psychologist, as a researcher, and the understanding of humans, of how people discover meaning and purpose, how we develop who we are, matched very closely to the understanding of humanity, meaning and purpose, and why people become who they are that I gained from the Torah. And the project of the book is meant to show how a single unified model can be used to illuminate each of those two. So to kind of learn from both to create a single way of looking at the world that allows each method of looking at the world to better understand the purpose and what each of the other method allows us to see.
So on that point, it interests me. I'm just looking up the name. So on that point, that interests me. You speak about them as like having different languages and different ideas, but in many ways, before we started coining the term psychology, I think people spoke about the internal expression of people as like this the soul. Meaning, I think that's how it was always referred to. And I think even Carl Jung, famously, who treated the founder of AA, spoke much about man's yearning for connection to God as really much of the motivation of the drives of man. So I'm not. It's interesting that we think of these as like separate fields, but in many ways they were joined.
But when I say separate fields, I mean, how do we know if something is true? From the perspective of Torah, if you're interpreting the Torah correctly, you're using the Messiah appropriately to go back to what the Torah means, that's what true is. From the perspective of psychology, if you have a scientific experiment that verifies something, that is what truth is. How do you build up your models? How do you understand what they mean? As well as the fundamental kind of ontology of how they're looking at the universe are separate languages.
Right. So they're coming from a different perspective, but it has to be. I always I would never found a case. I never believed that something could be empirically true, but the Torah would contradict it. Like I often ideas that come up in psychology that end up being debunked later is because the empirical backing wasn't strong.
Well, the Kuzari says that, I remember this, Chas v'shalom, that the Torah should ever expect us to believe something that our minds have shown to be false. I am firmly on the Kuzari's side. However, the Torah, correctly understood, doesn't make an enormous amount of empirical claims about psychology. That's not really the point of the Torah. The Torah is not a science book. The Torah is not a psychology textbook. The Torah is a book about Hashem, all about the story of Klal Yisrael, about how do we achieve closeness to Hashem. That's not the same purpose. It's not the same vehicle to see the world. Therefore, yes, you could find some things in the Torah that parallel things in psychology. But I think it's a mistake to think that they are, in some profound sense, the same. They are not the same. They
Yeah.
are two languages that are both meaningfully describing the same reality. Therefore, they shouldn't contradict each other. But that's a different idea.
Yeah, and I actually really liked something you said on a previous podcast where you said you're not interested, and I'm also totally not interested in like the ex post facto like proofs where like aha, you see that Judaism knew this like 300 years ago. Like yeah, I know that our sages were geniuses when it came to understand humanity, and I believe that came from the Torah, but it feels very like it feels like very it feels like pathetic in many ways to like aha, I found a new proof. No, like we don't need, I don't need like the latest, article in Psychology Now to like prove my Masora.
Yeah, the way I think of this is as we have no need to apologize to the apologetics in any way for the Torah. We are confident. I'm actually middle of writing now one of my follow-up to this Sefer, and writing about Purim, and a lot of what Purim, in my view, has to do with core existential themes. How do we deal with a world and a time where we don't have Hashem showing us what to do? We don't have Nevi'im. We're faced with the possibility of death without a Hashem in front of us to show us who we are and what we are supposed to be, which are core existential questions and themes that have been addressed at great length by 19th, 20th century existential philosophers. And in my introduction, I say, I am not interested in dealing with that. I'm not going to quote Camus and Sartre because I don't think we need to turn to reflect on how secular philosophers dealt with these questions. We have a Messiah. We can look within and see how we have dealt with these questions. And I think that's a much more useful, meaningful thing to do. And yeah, then throughout the rest of my writing about Purim, the next four chapters, I don't mention Sartre. I don't need to. We have our own way of looking at these things.
Right. I often feel like I've benefited a lot from philosophy, just in terms of, like you said, like seeing the question and then like that's what the Torah was addressing. Like that's what's
Yes.
like if you look at say like things like our foundations of our faith, like if you ask like what is the motivation to have those, it's sometimes if you see like deep philosophical questions coming from like existential questions, it's oh, that's what this is addressing. The fact that God communicates with man is an important thing, like that if we're to have a relationship, and that like so to um okay, so yeah, so on that point, you speak a lot about something called self-creation. Can you explain what you mean by that,
Yes,
and why
also
that
a
is,
very
and why?
existential idea. I mean, not that I get into it, actually, I don't mention this really at all explicitly in my book, but now that I'm really bringing up existential themes, I mean, the idea of Sartre's self-creation is one of the fundamental ideas of existential thought is the idea that existence precedes essence, as Sartre said, that we actually have to create ourselves. But I view that very, very differently than secular philosophers because I don't believe that we happen to exist. I believe that the world was created for a purpose. It's just that we don't necessarily have access to that. And we were created deliberately concealing a lot of the rationale, the meaning of the world, because we need to create that ourselves. That's part of what makes us who we are. And that itself allows us to be closer and it's more similar to Hashem. So that in some sense was the foundation of my entire project, that we were created to self-create. We are, so to speak, co-creators of ourselves with Hashem. Hashem didn't finish our creation. Hashem created the opportunity for us to further self-create. Because if we are just Hashem's creations, we cannot be like him because he wasn't created by anybody else. To be like him, we have to be doing our own work. We have to be doing our own creation. And I got this core idea from the Ramchal. He kind of says this almost like as a side point early on in Derech Hashem. And you can really build a whole philosophy, a whole way of thinking about the world from that principle, that we are creating ourselves. And what I do is through understanding of psychology and then also from other works of Machshava, show how it's our choices, using our exercise of Bechira, or in the psychological sense, are the choices we make that shape who we are. And over the whole course of our existence, we create a choice narrative, a story of our choices that in a profound sense is us. You can call that an identity, a self-concept. You can call it a neshama if you prefer. But in a profound sense, we are creating who we are through the exercise of our bechira over the course of our entire lives. That story of growth, hopefully, of becoming closer and more similar to Hashem, is a story of self-creation to become godly. And therefore, that is the that's what everything is really about. And everything is then just a building up from that. So how do we make this real? How does this happen? How is the Torah and Klal Yisrael designed in a way to enable this in its highest, most optimal way over time?
But it's different. It's drastically different from, I think, how a lot of people view modern psychology, because the focus, because it's with the Torah, the focus is not on the self. It's not like a selfish pursuit, like, oh, I need to discover myself. But if I'm understanding you, it's, the Ramchal's orientation is God made me with some imperfections in order that I should become elevated through my choices.
Yes. And the elevation is not, yeah, I'm not navel gazing and kind of focusing the self is not the point. The point is to understand you and your story enough to act in the world. Because choices are always about outside. The becoming like Hashem, we can't actually be like Hashem in himself. We have no ability to even think about or talk about Hashem himself. All we can see of Hashem is who he is in this world, meaning his choices, so to speak, his actions, his patterns of actions. And we can try to emulate those, which is all about outside. So all of our choices, all the patterns we're trying to emulate and instantiate and create ourselves in line with are all about outside. How can we be like Hashem, so to speak, in helping others, in creating a world of meaning and making the world a place that is a world that is a vehicle for good, for our vision of what is the ideal, optimal good in this world. And that all, so yeah, it starts with kind of being mindful and being aware of oneself, but all of the story of our self-creation is actually externally focused because you're trying to create yourself by making choices that are about the world of outside yourself.
And it's almost like getting out of, a lot of those choices require you to like get out of yourself. I shouldn't be
Exactly.
selfish. I should care about people. I shouldn't be angry. I should, so interesting. I also happen to be a big fan of the Ramchal. I'm a fan to call it. I find the Ramchal's writing so profound. It's actually, I remember being struck by an idea that he wrote over there. He said, just such an obvious point that he made. He said, if God had created the world with different words, it would have been a different world. I was like, oh, that's so obvious, meaning you can learn from the way he chose to create the world what the point is.
Yes.
It's not there's nothing haphazard to the way he created the world.
It is
That
all a single system. The world that Hashem created, Hashem is creating the world, us, what we are doing in the world is all a single system Hashem created for a purpose, which is the highest good, which is creating other beings that have the potential to be like him, who is the highest good.
I actually I saw there's a Gemara that I was thinking about based on what you had said, what I listened to earlier, that the Gemara says that when someone dies, they'll go up to heaven, and the body will claim, "What do you mean? It has nothing to do with me. This is the soul." And the soul will claim, "There's nothing to do with me. That was the body." So God will bring them two together and judge them at once. So I was thinking to myself at one point, like, who are you? Who are you? So it almost sounds like from that you are your decisions, meaning that's the thing that you get to create. That the merger of those two is your life choices will then be the definition of you, and the body you didn't create, and the soul you didn't create, but the work that they did together is.
Yeah, that's a wonderful way to put it. The way I think about this, and then Ramchal uses that analogy a lot of places. There's a whole like little story that he talks about that in the far, your two people come together, a blind person and a lame person, and to be able to pick trees from an orchid. There's a lovely story that he uses at various times, and the king says, "I'll put you together, the blind and the lame, because together you are able to pick my fruit, and therefore kind of punish you as one." But the way I think of it is something that in science we talk about emergent properties where when things come together, it allows for something that's different than individual things itself. Hydrogen and oxygen are both gases. When they come together, they're a liquid. The liquid hydrogen of H2O has unique emergent properties that are different than the chemicals, the elements that come together within it. And I think of our neshama and in this higher sense of the potential to connect to Hashem and our body, when they come together, we have Bechira. Each one individually doesn't really have Bechira. but it's the combination of the two that has an emergent property of Bechira, which is our choices. So our choices of what we're creating, it's something that neither alone has the capability to do. Our choices, and therefore our choice narrative, and what I think of as this higher neshama that we are creating, is an emergent property of both. Therefore, yes, that's exactly, I think, what Chazal may have been had in mind.
And I think also, a lot of people, the Ramchal is very important over here, because a lot of people think of the soul as like a as like a as riding the body, like, and holding the reins, and that's not a terrible metaphor, but the the Ramchal is not into that at all. The Ramchal believes that the unity of those two structures is the point, is the ultimate goal, and the falling of man was actually to make the separation, and eventually they'll be joined again. So then the orientation, if you get angry and your body is red, and like, or you yell at somebody, that's you bringing your everything lower, because that's you. It's not just spacesuit, it's not just shoes. That's you.
Your choices are you, and you are the result, therefore. Who you are is the result of the story you're creating with your choices. And I've also found in research-wise, psychology, this really connects to people's sense of purpose and meaning and who they are. It actually fits perfectly with this therapy that I've been developing called continuous identity cognitive therapy, that is designed through our choices to create an identity, a continuous identity over time that is aligned with somebody with who we want to become. And that same model for seeing what we are here, what we are doing, fits with this psychological model of how we are doing what we do to have meaning and purpose in our life, which in terms of psychology is the model that I developed separately to help people who have mental illness. The same patterns are in both.
It's something that interests me a lot, and then in terms of, let's say like the common treatment for, say, depression has always been the assumption that there's like a chemical imbalance, and therefore we need to treat the chemical imbalance with chemicals. Now, I'm no doctor, and I certainly not going to pretend to say that these things are never useful, and I am certainly a customer of big pharma in general, but it seems to me that it's important to look at pain. Emotional pain has to be a symptom in many ways of the soul. You cannot, they said it's a chemical imbalance, right? So why does somebody get depressed after they commit heinous crimes? Because it just happens that when you commit heinous crimes and your chemicals get out of whack, you have a lower serotonin count. No, there's your body is responding to evil.
We're not just chemicals, but even, I mean, even just from a purely scientific psychopharmacological perspective, the serotonin hypothesis has largely been debunked. There's these large meta-analyses that have come out showing that depression is not just about an imbalanced serotonin. It could be that SSRIs, which serotonin reuptake inhibitors, decrease depression, but apparently it's not because of just a direct imbalance. Our minds, our brains are very complicated, and these simple takes on how our minds and brains work are almost always wrong. That's one of the things we've learned.
And they disregard the spiritual. Whereas something like, Alcoholics Anonymous will not say that you shouldn't use psychiatry, but they will say to you, hey, take responsibility for the things you've done, turn to God, because like that has to be the foundation of personal responsibility. You cannot exclude personal responsibility from develop the system where they try to make people okay with doing evil, but that never works in the long time, because there's something in the soul screams that, hey, this is not. And I want to get to a point that you spoke about, that how somebody, we wear many hats in life, and sometimes we feel that they contradict each other. How do you both in your therapy and in the thesis of the book, how does one work on um feeling like those are unified? Because that really, I think, speaks to a lot of people, that somebody could be in yeshiva or be in the base medrash, and they get all uplifted and holy, and then they're at their job, and they're like getting annoyed at coworkers, and they're getting annoyed at their kids, and they're like, hey, where's that guy that was sitting in There's learning Gemara.
There's no simple answer to that. I wish there was. But we are so complicated, and kind of unifying ourselves in the different areas of our life and the different time periods of our life is part of the great work of all of our lives. There's no simple answer, but there are some principles that could help. Start with, why are you doing either of those? Why are you going to work? What are you trying to do with it? You want money. Why do you want money? Why do you want to support your family? What's underlying all of it? Why are you in yeshiva? Why were you in that? If you get to the whys and you really are honest with yourself about what's underlying them, and sometimes that means, yeah, my why is maybe I just want to be famous or I want to be wealthy or whatever. And then you say, is that really why I should be doing this? And you try to go a little deeper. If you keep on getting not just maybe the shallow why, but what should be the why, what matters to you, you often find that there's core things that really are meaningful to you, to your life, something that you want out of your life. And for many, I would say most people, doing so allows you to see the different parts of your life from the same perspective. The same idea that through my life, I'm trying to create something, I'm trying to be something in the world. Over time, this is the choices I make are in line with this vision of the who I want to be, or the story I want to tell. And then the different parts of your life become aspects of that same underlying story that you're trying to create. So you're at work and let's say I'm talking to a suicidal client. And the reason why I'm doing that is the same reason that when I'm at home and my kid is crying, I talk to them. The same reason that I'm doing my taxes. It's all, they aren't separate. I'm trying to do something in this world, and all of those are emanating from that same purpose. The clearer, richer, and more you act in line with that framework, the more each part of your life, each part of yourself become unified because they fundamentally are, or at least can be, if you have that single framework that you're applying to each area.
And purpose is always, the great motivator, more than money, more than anything.
Yeah, this is a question I like asking people. Just maybe people don't like that I ask it so much, but I ask different people. If somebody gave you $10 billion, would you continue doing your job? What would you keep on doing in your life, and what would you not? And what people often their first thought is, "Oh, I would never do this." But their second thought is, then what? I ask, what would you do? And it often comes down to people realize, but wait, I'm actually doing something with my job that I want to do with my job. Maybe the day to day are more things that I'd rather not, but fundamentally, I want to be doing things active, productive. I care about that stuff. So maybe I would choose a different job, maybe not. Maybe I can. There was that way of thinking, though. Okay, let's say somebody took the question. People have this idea that money in our current society, materialistic values and hedonistic values, our kind of culture, were embedded within, and not to, I mean, unfortunately, we are affected by that as well. And people end up thinking of money as being a intrinsic value or intrinsic good. But if you have people have that conversation with themselves, let's say money was not an issue, would you still care about money? And at first they think yes, but they're often able to go a little past that and find a purpose, some deeper motivation that they have, an underlying reason why they ever need money to begin with. And that then allows them to think about who they are and what they want out of their life in a much richer way.
Yeah. And that actually, I wanted to get your take on this, because I think I've been thinking a lot recently that we talk a lot about the costs of having religious life and the costs of weddings and bar mitzvahs and different things that we do, and trying to put caps on that. And I actually think it's a mistake to view those from a financial lens. And I want to show you a little bit of an AI video I made. It was a joke, but I was trying to make a point over here, and I'm interested to see your take. It's only 10 seconds, and then we'll discuss. 1 second. Let me just share my screen. Can you see the video? Okay, so let me just play it. A second.
With the wedding's extravagant expenses and a new Camry for the young couple, I had to take on another job. Because it's vital that those dedicating their lives to Torah study and Hashem start their journey on solid ground. With the
Yes, I think I
So
see what you're getting at there.
so my point is that there's like they have this joke in Navardic that somebody I am that I'm have nothing against the color world. I think people should stay in color for longer than they do. I very much pro. I hope to support the sons-in-laws at some point. But the point I was trying to make over there is, in our value system, it's not solid ground to tie ourselves to materialism. Meaning, if you had a little bit like your $10 billion question, let's say you had $1 billion to spend on a wedding. The reason why you shouldn't do that is not because of a fiscal constraint. It's because Jeff Bezos' wedding in Venice, where he had all these celebrities and blew the top off, is not the thing that would symbolize the beginning of a Jewish home. It's like the wrong, and it's not, it has nothing to do with money. It's just that it's like those are not our values. So from that perspective, do you think they should be promoting, besides for like, takanas making weddings like this, and those are all very important, but shouldn't it be more from the perspective of our values do not align with materialism? Our values align with our mission in life.
Yes, it's a very hard topic to talk about because I think this is one of the great nisyanis of our contemporary society, and people have a hard time thinking about this, myself included, completely clearly. And something that occurred to me is that there's a phrase that I hear a lot these days, Torah Gedula, that people have both Torah and Gedula of, like, I guess let's call it material success. And they're getting it from Chazal. Chazal say that about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, but Chazal also make it clear that he did not benefit or enjoy this world even with a small finger. And what that to me means that all the gedula he had, the material possessions, were only solely the choices he made regarding them had nothing to do with enjoyment. They were completely based on his Torah. The gedula was a gedula of Torah, therefore was not hana. If people are on the level where their beautiful, luxurious lifestyle is fully and 100% defined by and for the sake of Torah, then Torah Gedula. But it's very hard. That's a madriga that Rabbi Yehuda has. It's a level that's extraordinarily hard to reach. So seeing that as a standard that people should aspire to, having Gedula as though one is Rebbe and has that capability to say about oneself that I have never benefited or enjoyed one's Gedula, I think is misunderstanding the idea from a Jewish perspective of Torah and Gedula. It's bothered me. And honestly, as I'm sure kind of the two of us see this similarly, a lot of the materialistic, sometimes like conspicuous consumption, the wealth that is on display does not feel like it's coming from a Torah value perspective. It feels like people feel like they have Torah, they're supporting Torah, they have Siddharim, and therefore now they're able to enjoy life. They have kind of settled that, and now therefore they could now enjoy. And the reality is that it's completely antagonistic to the system of Torah. It's not just a single value of Torah, it's the entire system of what we are here in this world for, how we are supposed to be doing that in this world in a way that is the whole, that's called our purpose, is diametrically opposed to that perspective that we have been Yotze, our Torah and our religious life, and therefore now can enjoy the flesh pots, the world that we are embedded within. That is not it's not really, it's certainly not an aspirationally Jewish perspective. Historically, yes, this is not the first time this has happened. When Jews become wealthy, this is a struggle that Jews have had. They had this in Spain. They had this many times in history. They had this during Gullus. We say that V'yishman Yeshuan V'yibat. There's many Mamorim both in the Tanakh and Chazal. We could talk. It's not such a new issue, but to the degree that it is now, and the problems we have now do feel like it's a modern context to this. The amount of wealth, and the ability for people to both sort of, so to speak, be Yotze, the idea of Talmud Torah, Limud Torah, and Habatzas Torah, and then have so much kind of, let's call it, mind space and financial resources to put into this do seem to be somewhat unusual. This idea of Torah Gedula in this way does seem to be a little bit novel from a historical perspective. And Every jar has its nisanis, and Hashem is put us into this world to be able to grow from the nisayon that we have. This isn't bad. This is something that we need to deal with as a society, as Klal.
Right. And just to clarify, I'm not judging anyone. The reason why I don't live like that is probably because I don't have the money to do it. I'm saying I'm not claiming to be on some special level, but more what I saw was more like the discussions that I see around finances in the Orthodox world, and in terms of like making rules around sizes of events, always came from the perspective, always sounds like it's coming from the perspective of, we don't want to have people keeping up with the Joneses and whatever, and that's true and valid, but it seemed to be missing what you're bringing, which is, what are our values? What is a bar mitzvah? What are we celebrating? How do we make an event in line with those? What is a kosher concert? Like, what is a concert for? Not the question is like, is it too many people? Is it too many bands? Like, where is everyone going to sit? Those are all very important questions. But like, what is this thing for? And if you're saying it's just to let your hair down, so then like, and Rabbi Pear was famous for saying that's not terrible too. But we explain what we do. We bring our values everywhere we go. Hopefully, I mean, that's our aspiration. So I wanted to, give me 1 second. I had. So what would you tell us about this treatment that you've developed in mental health? How does it differ, and what's unique about it, and how does it bring these perspectives into it?
Well, one way of thinking about it is that it connects directly with what you were just talking about. We aspirationally should define ourselves by our values, and not just individual choices, but the story of our choices, who we are over time, our identity, and our, so to speak, our continuous identity, our self over time, should be defined by what's meaningful, our values, our purpose. The therapy I created is designed to help people do that, to build a sense of self over time, where they have a story that's meaningful to them, based on their values, with an aspirational future self that they're trying to build themselves towards. That the whole story of themselves in this world is one where they find it meaningful. They're doing something with their story in this world, for the world, in a way that connects to something deep inside them. And this therapy is unusual. It does draw from cognitive therapy because how we understand our story is very relevant, how we interpret things going on in our life. It draws from acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, because idea of values, making choices based on values, is a core function of that therapy as well. It draws from existential psychotherapy, the idea of meaning, narrative. It draws from many, many places. But the core aim, the mission, the goal of creating this identity as self over time is unusual. This is something that comes together in this way. The idea that we're trying to create this self over time is a novelty of this therapy. I developed it specifically first for people who are suicidal, because when people are missing the sense of a self over time, don't have a good sense of the future, don't have a sense of meaning and purpose, life has so much pain. Why should they continue? Really, it's a good question. But in the flip side, not just give them tools, but actually give them a sense of self, a life that is worth it for them because they understand what they're doing with their life and who they're becoming and how it's connected to their values, does seem to be extraordinarily helpful for
So
people who are struggling with that.
you're not just treating their sadness. You're like giving them purpose, which is the root
Exactly.
cause of their nihilism.
Yeah. Instead of symptoms, which is kind of an output, I see depression as sometimes more of a symptom of a fundamental sense of self over time. Then the root issue is who they are in this world. And if we're able to help them with that, many of the other things help. And the truth of the matter is, yes, sometimes people are depressed. And yes, the world is painful. And if people have a sense of why they could get through that, as Yalom says, sorry, not Yalom, who says this? Viktor Frankl. If somebody has sufficient why, they can get to any how, any what. Sorry, I'm misquoting it, but that idea, that is kind of part of the root idea here. If you can help people with that by giving them a future, giving them a sense. And so far, I've been working with this therapy. I have a lot of basic science kind of evidence to support it, and have some data showing that it helps people. And I've also learned that it could work for many things, not just a suicide, but this model of how we can be in this world in a healthy way seems to be a very useful one across many many issues that people have. In the book, I wrote where I talked about somebody who had left Kailo and felt a sense of that he doesn't know who he is anymore, struggled with himself, his marriage, and the sense of self over time with the future that he's trying to build towards. really helps. I also work with transitioning veterans who left the military and are now civilians. The same issues. People don't have a sense of who they are over time that makes sense to them, what they're doing with their life. And the results of that are many, many mental health problems. So if we can build that, we can do a lot.
And then you're like looking at pain or difficulties as a signal rather than just, the disease. Like
Yes.
what is that showing us, and if people that can't feel pain, there's a real medical condition like that, those people die young. It's bad to not be able to feel.
Yes. I would say the same thing with depression. If you can't feel sad when you are missing meaning and purpose in your life because there's some external force preventing you, call it a drug, call it whatever it may be, that is a lack, and your life will be less full because you don't have the capacity to feel sad, to mourn, to feel unhappy with a lack of meaning. The goal is not to remove the sadness. The goal is to become a person that through who you are, you're able to have meaning in your life.
Do you have to go? I see.
Yeah,
I see.
I have a
Oh,
2 o'clock.
so I want to thank Rabbi Dr. Sokol for joining us. He has a hard stop, so hopefully we'll continue this at some point. This is really engaging. Thanks again. Thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Walter. I appreciate your having me, and this was a wonderful conversation. I look forward to
Yeah,
continuing.
thank you.